Tom Kundert, Lisbon-based football journalist and founder of Portugal. Welcome.
Hello, Steve. Yeah, good to speak to you. Thank you for inviting me on.
No, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. It's you've always been my guy in Portugal. So when we were looking for basically the authority on talking about United's role in Portugal's World Cup qualifiers, I was only going to come to you. So it began with a pretty comfortable 5-0 win over Armenia, but it was kind of a unique fixture, wasn't it? Because it was Portugal's first game since the Nations League final, since beating Spain, and also the first game since the incredibly tragic passing of Diogo Jota. Was it a strange fixture in that sense?
Yeah, for sure. That absolutely dominated the narrative. Even in the call up uh, before Roberto Martinez announced the squad. The very first thing he did is, and I have to say, the FPF, the Portuguese Federation, and Roberto Martinez himself really conducted himself, in exemplary manner since that tragic event of Diogo Jota dying in the car crash. And but obviously, it was such a shocking event, and he was so popular. You can tell, when somebody dies, everyone always, says what a wonderful person they were. But you can tell with Jota, the way people are talking about him, he really was a special person. And so that obviously completely rocked the squad. And so this whole match, like you say, the first match since it happened. So that was really the dominant, almost the dominant narrative of the match. There was a big, of course, they had a minute silence before the game. There was a huge I don't know if it was the fans or the FPF themselves. They had a huge banner of Jota, saying, always one of us, and all the players spoke about him before and after the match. So yeah, quite an emotional game, but Portugal certainly did the business on the pitch.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when there's something so seismic emotionally, and let's say you're Bruno Fernandes lining up, and you look over to the fans and you see that enormous banner, it's got to be triggering, hasn't it? You've almost got to be just sort of craving that first whistle so you can get down to business almost.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how people are going to react? Because of course, everyone, I'm sure, reacts to a tragedy like this in their own way. And it was quite something, wasn't it, seeing the way that Salah reacted after that first game. I think it's the first game at Anfield, maybe when he went to the Cop, or maybe it was the Charity Shield. I can't remember, but it was quite something just seeing how emotional it was. And you forget, don't you, sometimes, Steve, us being football journalists or observers of the game, and you kind of forget these are human beings, and that's someone who they spent so much time with, laughing and joking with, and like I say, such a popular guy, and just 1 second, and his life is taken away from them. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react. Of course, all the talk has been about Portugal using this as a motivating factor, and they're like I say, it's quite nice the way they've handled this. They said every single squad selection now, that they'll announce the squad, and it's 23 plus one. That one being Diogo Jota, and so
Right.
he's kind of be with them, and all the players have said we really want to just go as far as we can in the World Cup, possibly try and win the World Cup to dedicate it to Diogo Jota. So hopefully, for this tragic circumstance, it may actually have a positive consequence for Portugal in that respect.
In terms of making the right start in that direction, a 5-0 away win's pretty good as it goes. Just a bit of housekeeping. It was a 4-2-3-1 with Bruno playing as a 10, was it?
Yeah, and there's
And he played 90 minutes. So how did he perform?
yeah, played really well. Really, it's one of Portugal's best performances for. Well, they've actually been playing well, recently. Obviously, winning the Nations League,
Yeah.
but it was such a one-sided game. It's difficult to know how good they were or how bad Armenia were. I remember, Armenia used to be a fairly decent side, and a few years ago, Portugal played them. 10 years ago, actually, in qualifying for Euro 2016, and there were two quite tough matches. I think it was 3-2 there and 1-0 here in Portugal. But yeah, Armenia were pretty terrible, or Portugal just completely overran them from start to finish. Really played well, especially the wide players. Joao Cancelo. One interesting thing, which I suppose people outside Portugal may not have realised is that there are 5 scorers in this game. Sorry, 5 goals, 3 goal scorers, and all 3 goal scorers play their football in Saudi Arabia, which is quite interesting. Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo, of course, bagging another 2. Joao Felix, it was a big surprise, of course, that he went to Saudi Arabia, plays the same team as Ronaldo, Al Nasser, and Cancelo. Joao Cancelo scored the other goal. He was also in Saudi Arabia. So, that's really quite an interesting kind of sideshow. How will the fact that 3 key players for Portugal, they've actually got 4 players in their squad who play in Saudi Arabia. Some people criticise that, saying how can we pick players from a substandard league? You can look at it the other way and say perhaps they'll be fresher, whichever way you spin it. The players themselves especially keep saying, it's a competitive league, it's getting better and better, it's a good standard. But, you watch a few of those games, I've watched a few of them because of the Portuguese players there, and you can't really compare it. The intensity, I'd say, especially, it's not the same as European football. But maybe that's not so important, and maybe it will help Portugal. So yeah, good game, and Bruno himself, very good game as well.
Okay, because he's been obviously slightly more withdrawn for United this season. I mean, he did move forward a little bit in the Burnley game towards the end. Do you see him as someone who can, or is he widely seen in Portugal as a midfielder who can flip between those different central roles?
He is, although now he's probably actually going to be playing a bit further forward, which is, I think, his best position, simply because of the emergence of Vitinha. Is this world-class midfielder who tends to drop quite deep. Yesterday, he was actually dropping very deep, Vitinha, and allowing Bruno to play further forward. I mean, Bruno Fernandes, I think, for maybe since I'd say about 2002 World Cup, maybe the end of qualifying, for about 2 years, 2 or 3 years, he was Portugal's best player, without a doubt. So good, so good. I think Roberto Martinez really kind of gave him a new lease of life. He seemed to really thrive under him, and he was really good. And I'd say the only reason he's not been Portugal's best player maybe the last year or so is just because the emergence of Vitinha is just this absolutely incredible all-action midfielder, and just the kind of general of the team, which is interesting because that used to be kind of Bruno Fernandes's role. And so yeah, Fernandes just really neat yesterday, a bit quiet in the first half, but Portugal also, they used the flanks a lot in this game, Cancelo and Mendes, and so most of their forward play was going down the flanks, and so not so much down the middle. So you didn't really get to see Bruno so much. He kind of came to life a bit in the second half, hit the post, almost scored again from a shot from outside the box. And I also remember putting a really lovely cross in the first half, which actually I think it was Mendes. Yeah, really a bad miss. That should have been an assist for Bruno. But yeah, pretty good performance. He's got amazing stats, now, Steve, for Portugal. He's got 25 goals. And you have to remember, of course, Bruno Fernandes, being a Portugal player, never takes penalties for Portugal, because that's reserved for Cristiano Ronaldo. So yeah, I was just having a look at the stats, and if he had taken penalties, you could add another 10 goals to that. He's been playing for Portugal for a long time. That would put him on 35, and that would put him 4th in the all-time lists of Portugal scorers. So just behind Eusebio. So he's really been a fantastic servant for Portugal, and people are really hoping that he can crown it maybe with something special next year.
How popular is he in terms of the national team? In terms of how the public view him, I suppose, is he seen as like a load-bearing player, like one of the great hopes going into a big tournament?
Yeah, it's funny because he's quite, even though he's got this superb record for Portugal, I wouldn't say he's absolutely unanimously loved by the Portuguese football public. First of all, you have to remember that Portugal is really tribal. The football fans in Portugal are really tribal. Of course, it's associated with Sporting, played for Sporting. And Bernardo Silva is associated with Benfica, and those two, it's a bit like, can you remember the old Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard?
Remember, painfully, yes.
And they said they couldn't quite play together. They never seemed to complement each other, and it's quite similar, pretty much the same thing with with Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva. These two just absolutely brilliant midfielders, being at the top of their game for the last 5 years or so, but they never really seem to click together for Portugal. And so some people, they said, we can only play one of these. It should be Bernardo. Other people said, no, we can, it should be Bruno. Some people said should play the both of them. So I'd say that. And I think because of Bruno's, I absolutely love Bruno, but you can kind of understand why opposition fans and some football fans in general might get a bit annoyed with him. This tendency to kind of complain a lot to his teammates, to the referee, moan a lot. I think that's just because he's so he's so focused on winning that he can't contain his emotions really, or he just shows his emotions on the pitch.
Yeah.
So I think that also sometimes does turn a few people off him. So I wouldn't say he's a massively popular, universally popular Portugal player, but of course, all the Portugal players are pretty much looked upon as because Portugal have got such a strong team now, as if not heroes, are certainly idolized to a certain extent. And so and he's been such a great servant, and his statistics, you just look at them, they're unbelievable. Portugal have just been really, I think now, for instance, going into big tournaments, in the past people would have perhaps picked Portugal as a dark horse. I think now, I don't know, maybe you can set me right on this, Steve, or now, but from my point of view, I think they've kind of gone beyond that. They've maybe taken a step forward. You can't really even call Portugal a dark horse anymore. I think you just have to say straight up, they're one of the favourites. They're one of the strongest sides in the world. And of course, that progression, I think, has a lot of that is down to players like Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva, obviously, Ronaldo, Vitinha. Just some of the best players in the world playing it week in, week out, and in the case of Bruno, of course, doing it on the biggest stage.
And although he missed out through injury, he withdrew. Diogo Dalot as well.
Yeah.
How's he perceived?
Yeah, well, that's interesting because they were talking about this yesterday, because Cancelo, he hasn't played for a year, and he came in and he was man of the match. He was just sensational. He was superb at right back. Of course, Dalot's position. The thing with Cancelo is always been this amazing kind of force of nature going forward, but you kind of questioned his defending sometimes, not the best defender. And so Dalot is kind of seen as the safer option. And so that's why I think Dalot's his place in the squad, and even in the side in quite a few games, will, if not guaranteed, I think he'll definitely continue to to be a very big part of the Portugal setup. Martinez likes him a lot. He chooses him a lot. He selects him for most games. Like I say, Cancelo he's had a few injury problems, so he's been out the last few months, but Dalot's been first choice. I think he only wasn't first choice when Semedo, I think, came in. I think he himself had 1 or 2 injury problems, Dalot, recently. But he's good solid player. Definitely, I think would be on the plane to the 2026 World Cup, and a big part of the squad. And also, just from the kind of social point of view, he's great friends with Ronaldo. Even from that, I think they were quite briefly together, weren't they, at Manchester United? But they seem to really bond together, and it's quite funny in the training photos and the training camps. You can see they're almost always together. It used to be Ronaldo and Pep, who were like kind of even soulmates, and now it seems that Dalot has kind of stepped into that berth now. Pep has retired, and big part of the squad.